I'm Ashwinaya. This house would hold social media companies accountable for its users' hate speech. We are opposition team actually. So, first of all, hardly anybody would match up to a crowd in person and announce their hate for all members of a certain ethnic group, race, or religion just out of the blue. However, this uses the confidence to make bold statements on social media. One would think that in this day and age we live in relative harmony, at least in our real lives. While people may still have their differences, they have mostly learned to keep it civil in the community and the workplace. Most countries have laws protecting minority groups from discrimination, and there are numerous organizations that champions freedom, tolerance, and diversity. What constitutes hate speech? There is no defined set of rules that can reliable identify hate speech for what it is. As its core, hate speech tends to attack people for having certain characteristics such as their race, skin color, ethnic group, religion, gender, sexual orientation, essentially harassing, intimidating, or calling for violence against people for who they are. However, with the prevalence of hate speech in the online world, one may question if the social media companies are the ones who are accountable for their users' hate speeches.
Hate speech is a commonplace on social media. I scan the comments quickly. The extent of this issue is illustrated by a part of a radically heated YouTube video. Although the majority of the largest social media platforms, including Google, Facebook, and Twitter, have their own policies regarding whether and what form of hate speech are actually permitted on their websites, the rules are frequently applied inconsistently and can be challenging for users to comprehend. This study will examine the breadth and nature of the
Alright, in my opinion, users giving hate speeches in social media is because of the poor behavior of users. There are millions of people using social media platforms. Social media is a tool that is becoming quite popular these days because of its user-friendly features. All this makes you wonder that something so powerful and with such a massive reach cannot be all good. But due to some people's poor behavior, there are some users are getting affected by the hate speech in social media by posting negative comments about somebody, spreading rumors to defame someone is totally an immoral thing which affects the other users. As everyone is caught up on the social network, it makes it very easy for anyone to misuse this access. Usually, this poor behavior of people who give hate speeches in social media might not have a stable mindset, or they might not have a stable mental state too. However, the intention of this activity is one and the same, to hurt people and bring them harm. It also disturbs the peace of mind of a person. Many people are known to experience depression after they are affected with hate speech in social media. In addition, the indulge in self-harm. All the derogatory comments made about them makes them feel inferior. It also results in a lot of insecurities and complexes. The victim which suffers in the form of harassment starts having self-doubt. When someone points your insecurity, it all happened because of some people's poor behavior where they didn't even give respect to other users of social media, which the social media platform has nothing to do with. The social media platforms aren't responsible for the misbehavior of people on social media. Social media platforms have billions of users worldwide, so they won't following everything as it's not going to be possible. Well, so in my opinion, the poor behavior of users is the biggest reason of hate speech happening in social media. Thank you.
Hello everybody, I'm Omar from Group 116, the government. So, yeah, Ajvina, I'm gonna say a little bit about your argument actually, and then I'm gonna say my own argument. So, Ajvina, as you said, social media platforms have millions of users worldwide now, which makes it hard for social media platforms to track every post that's being posted in their feed. But actually, I believe that they should make an auto filter that filters out inappropriate posts automatically from the newsfeed and removes it. Actually, like a live example of these filters is a social platform called Reddit. Where actually, when you post a video or a post, it goes under some checks to check whether it's suitable to go out for the community or no. This is done simply by having a certain number of bots in each community. So these bots usually do check the post to see if it's appropriate or no to be posted in the community. And if it's inappropriate, then the post will get deleted automatically. So I believe so that this should happen, like it should be applied in famous social media platforms. It will actually help to make the community there a better place for everyone. That was my little bit about your point of view, Ashwina.
This study will examine the breadth and nature of the issue of hate speech in social media today, using YouTube as an example, in an effort to find solution for reducing it. The discussion of arguments in favor of and against online hate speech codification is followed by a summary of a current hate speech and internet laws and relevant philosophy of law. We investigate and assess the strategies put out by various legal and communication specialists regarding whether and how to restrict hate speech online, to restrict the hate speech online. Finally, a proposal is made for a solution that aims to reduce the hate speech on social networking websites while still upholding the rights. One of the arguments that would hold social media companies accountable for its user hate speech is actually psychological damage and self-hatred. One justification sometimes given for outlawing or at least restricting hate speech is the psychological harm is as it goes to the group being persecuted by it. People will eventually start to question their own self and self-worth if their daily experience led them to believe they are actually not respected, accorded the same dignity, or treated with the same civility like as others. According to the research, those who are targets of hate speech or who are the victim of it may develop self-hatred as a result of a repeated negative messaging. Even worse, the targets of hate speech can start to accept the charges leveled against them. The worst impact of the hate speech on those targeted, according to a critical race theorist, what she was called the Mary Matsuda, is the propensity for the members of a group being disparaged to absorb the message and start believing in their own inferiority. Social scientists who research the impacts of racism have observed the language conveying a lack of esteem for someone, especially because of their race, tends to give the victim the feature of inferiority assigned to them. Of all the numerous expressions that make up the discourse of hate speech, insults are thought to be the most harmful to the individual or groups being targeted. Delgado claims that because race, gender, ethnicity are fixed features that can be changed, insults based on these traits can be more hateful. As a result, of the victims of these verbal abuses have few, if any, options are changing their race, social or sexual actually orientation, or etc. According to the empirical data, racism, like apathies, are the main way that discriminatory views are spread. It is common for people to include radical or gendered insults in their contacts and comments on the websites like YouTube and other social media platforms.
Well, as in my opponent team, this psychological damage and self-hatred happens because of the hate speech in social media. But in my opinion, I disagree with that because as a social media user, we should never react and lose self-worth due to the hate speech. When the user receives hate speech from social media, they should never take it personally and lose their self-worth. They should accept the fact that it's just a hate speech where it doesn't make any sense to their life. Users should never hate their self and give up easily after receiving a hate speech in social media because it will never define their life. It will never ever define their life. An individual who honors himself would prevent others from disrespecting him. Individuals with low and inflated self-worth and both narrow-minded, they are just different sides of the same bad coin, unhappy and unfulfilled. Low self-worth often exhibits as not manifesting what people desire. I propose a version of this argument that employs a broad conception of self-worth, a visual found in a wide range of moral traditions. That suppose a person would have an appropriate sense of self-worth in the face of tendencies both of overestimate and underestimate the value of oneself. Well, they should never react upon a hate speech in social media rather than they should believe on themselves. Moreover, when it comes to religion, users should stand up upon that hate speeches will never happen in social media anymore. So users should never downgrade themselves because of the hate speeches in social media, and they should prove that the hate speeches are unworthy for a social media user. So in my opinion, users should never ever downgrade themselves and react through the hate speeches in social media. They should always stay strong and believe on themselves, never ever lose self-worth just because it's self-hate in social media. Thank you.
Moving on to my point. Social media is a platform where millions of people share information and make connections with one another. On a personal level, people get to communicate with friends and family, discover new things, develop new interests, and most importantly, be entertained. Social media companies provide freedom of speech to all their users, but misusing the freedom of speech and spreading hate speech is a big mistake done by the users. Before a user is signed up, he or she should read the community guidelines created by the social media company. Furthermore, not all people are allowed to use social media. Users should be at least at age 13 years and above to use social media like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. At this age, teenagers are not small kids anymore and develop better rational thinking abilities and problem solving skills as they mature, and that is why social media companies allow teenagers starting from the age of 13 to use their platforms. And some people think that this is mainly for business and marketing purposes. So users of social media has their own responsibilities when they use social media, as they are the people who form a social media, and without them, social media is nothing with the social media companies by themselves. Therefore, a responsible user, the as a responsible user, the user should be accountable for his or her hate speech on social media. Social media is a place where people get the opportunity to share their emotions and expressions about something and get the freedom of speech. However, this doesn't mean that people can use hate speech on other individuals. But deciding whether a particular speech is worthy of protection or not is a slippery slope. In that case, other users can help social media companies on identifying users who use hate speech by reporting them. This makes it easier and faster for the social media companies to get rid of users who spread hate speech, and it's a win-win situation for both the social media companies and its users. Basically, everyone should work together to totally wipe out hate speeches on social media and not blame just the social media companies. Thank you.
So I'm going to have a rebuttal to argument 2 of the other group, which is risk upon social media companies when censoring shared content by individuals like hate speech. So first of all, being engaged in a communicative platform with millions of people who are from different nations and cultures may have inconvenient consequences regarding their shared content that probably might or will negatively enhance our manners. You can't guarantee that other teenagers will share hate speech or not. In fact, yes, teenagers have changed rationally from the previous generations. Still, there are teenagers and still their brains aren't yet fully grown up. Imagine a 17 years child old can be responsible of his shared content. That's of course unbelievable to censor a child 13 years old and allowing him to have a social media account. He can share whatever he wants and whatever drags him. Let's go back a bit to a not fully grown mind or grown brain. Not fully grown brain means a not 100% mindset that can distribute between what's right and what's wrong. In fact, it follows its pleasure, and most of the teenagers find pleasures in sharing violent content. As an example of violent content is the hate speech. And nowadays, we can see that most of the social media platforms is a teenagers' colony. They will directly result in deterioration of that specific platform that do not censor teenagers in special. As we know, all countries have their boundaries and restrictions. This of course depends on their nations, their cultures, religions, and public environment, etc. A lot of facts that can restrict their nation. So every nation must have their own terms and conditions in social media interaction with domestic users. As government of the country must be consulted by social media platforms, otherwise the country's government have the right to ban these platforms. This of course will delirious affect the social media platform, in which they might lose their followers from this country. As an example that happened in 2009, Meta owned Facebook and Twitter have been blocked in China since 2009 as part of a government crackdown against activities following deadly riots in Xinjiang province in China. So China's restriction of foreign media platforms and censorship of non-governmental materials have been duped the Great Firewall of China. This is due to not restriction these users from sharing inappropriate content, and this lead directly to the closure or to banning a social media platform from China. So I'm going to talk about argument 2, which mainly debates in risk upon social media companies when uncensoring shared content by individual, examples of hate speech. So point 1 I'm going to start with. Users can instantaneously share anything on the internet according to social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and other social media network sites are becoming increasingly integral commercial tools. Most of these organizations and websites create accounts only for advertising purposes, leading to millions of daily visitors. However, social networking companies confirmed concerns with privacy, security, and censorship. So let's imagine as an example, let's imagine a father who's the representative of his family, of course, exerting a great effort performing his job to purchase a chaste life for his family members. Nevertheless, he allows his children to do anything they want, whether it's legal or illegal, and get into troubles. They will of course ruin their father's name, their family name, and of course will shame him. This is exactly what social media companies would consecrate and even worse. They are fully responsible of any content and anything that happens to them, and they must exert some sort of monitoring and restrictions. The vast majority of teenagers and immature people make poor nutritional choices, particularly during adolescence. Diets for teenagers vary widely based on culture and region. However, there are definite tendencies in what youngsters choose to consume on a daily basis. Let's take a point that the majority of teenagers enjoy and continue sharing vulnerable and non-purposeful content on social media without being censored. This will impact upon us as a teenagers, following other teenagers or immature people. The timeline of our social media platform, example Facebook, would be full of undesired, hated, vulnerable content that we as amateur people don't want to see. This, of course, will cause me as a user to alien from this platform because it's not sharing the content I need.
Kill the Deputy Prime Minister of the opposition team 115. First of all, I would like to talk about the argument made by the Deputy Prime Minister of the government. Users cannot share anything they want on social media, as the system detects most hate speeches and blocks the content while warning the user's account on the use of hate speech or violating the community guidelines. This system is known as automatic detection. However, the user still tries to spread hate speech by using paralinguistic signals like emoticons and hashtags, then it's the user's fault as he is so desperate in sharing hate in social media. But don't get me wrong, as social media platforms are slowly adapting to users' tricks on sharing hate speech and will soon leave no room for social media users to share hate speech on the platforms. Furthermore, I assume that the father you stated was the social media companies and the users as the children. Repeating my point, social media companies don't allow users to do anything they want and are constantly working on correcting them by closing all the loopholes users use to share hate speech. Moving on, social media companies set boundaries and give guidelines to their users on how to use social media. Social media and users are not like parents and children. Parents monitor their children from a young age, and the quantity of children is not that high. On the other hand, social media users register themselves at any age and with any motive, and there are millions of social media users. So it's not as easy as we think for social media companies to monitor them, but they are still working on improving their platforms. Next, to the point where the Deputy Prime Minister stated that teenagers may enjoy sharing vulnerable and non-purposeful contents on social media. We can assume that they are enjoying sharing those contents, but they cannot continue doing that forever, as social media companies sooner or later will detect these types of contents and block it. If other users sees those contents before the company's monitoring team does, they can always report those contents, which then makes it easier for the social media companies to detect and block users who share those unpurposeful contents, thus creating a better environment for every user.
Now I'm going to talk about my argument. So I'm mainly going to talk about the fact that not only the person who posted the hate speech or an inappropriate post about someone gets to go on trial or something. Actually, the social media platform also gets to go on trial. So actually, there is a live case, a live example, which is the hate speech being said on Marcus Rashford. There is someone who said inappropriate words to him and he was racist against him. So actually, he raised a file to the court and he asked the court for financial compensation and to impose penalties on the social media platform and the person who shared the hate speech, and of course on the social media platforms because they allowed such things to be posted on their platform. So as we can see, hate speech makes a huge propaganda all over the world and may also cause some consequences to the country where the hate speech was said, especially if it was said to someone in a political position. Additionally, it may lead to demonstrations in some cases. For example, the demonstrations that happened against racism in the USA when the cop killed a black man without any reason, and many other demonstrations that changed many policies and sometimes even changed the president of a country just from a post being posted on social media or like some speech said on social media. So we can see how big the impact of posts and text being posted on social media is. So to sum up, social media should be responsible. Social media platforms should be responsible for what is being posted, as it may lead to huge consequences. The consequences can not only happen for the person posting such things, but also for the social media platform where the post was being posted. So that's all for me. I'm gonna pass my mic to my next teammate to talk about his argument and his rebuttal.
Hi everyone, my name is Barmin Sivakumar. I am from Team 116, representing Argument 4 Effects on Individuals' Psychological Well-being. towards hate speech. Victims of online hate speech may show low self-esteem, sleeping disorders, increased anxiety, and feelings of fear and insecurity. They may feel lonely or isolated, as one of the respondents from the UK explained that victims feel left out, like they have got no friends. Others identified chronic depression and bad schooling overall has possible consequences. One young girl explained that you could get upset from even the smallest thing, even if it's meant as a joke. I guess you become more vulnerable. According to another youngster, haters target the sensitivities and insult them, and they feel bad. In the end, they end up with more insecurities and they will turn more reserved, not so social, and they will have that fear of being insulted. The other fact that victims of online hate speech may develop social anxiety and feel the need to isolate themselves was brought up by many interviews. If someone is sitting behind a screen, they probably feel better sitting at home writing something. And the one who's the victim probably also keeps a low profile and have a say self-hatred towards them. Victims of online hate speech may feel as if their human dignity was violated, no longer seeing themselves as good and appropriate. In accordance with socio-culture norms, as young people described it, because of the online hate, they will just be so scared, like even express themselves or feel kind of lost, or the world is against them. They get stuck and stagnate in their social development and develop social anxiety and isolate themselves more often. Some respondents also pointed to the possibility of behavioral harms, with victims possibility committing suicide or cutting themselves. You are saying to someone, hey, that could later lead to like depression and likely to suicidal thoughts, which will bring, don't need which will bring. Please cut that off. Thank you. Oi, when discussing the support that victims might need, young people were able to identify possible sources of support, including parents, teachers, and even internet providers. At the same time, they also acknowledge that victims are likely to hesitate to ask for help since they are afraid that the problem will be dismissed or they will not be understood. They also do not want to make the problem official or they just feel embarrassed. Therefore, they want to deal with the problem by themselves by isolating and thinking and developing their self anxiety. As a result, social media platforms need to be responsible for what is posted so as to avoid significant consequences. Action on restricting hate comments should not be targeted at individuals but a social media itself. Hence, it can reduce the amount of recipients who fall into depression and self-hatred. As my opinion, I suggest that all social media creators should have a system or a group that monitors social media posts and hate speech to reduce or harm or even hurt the users by the hate comments. Thank you.
We have listened to all the arguments which solidifies that the social media companies cannot be held accountable for their users' hate speech on social media. As we stated in our arguments that the users are the main people who must be responsible for every action that they make while they are using social media apps. Yes, it's true that the social media companies should take a big step for the social media itself, but we must also take into consideration that users are the one who makes all those hate comments or hate speech in social media, and social media companies are trying to correct it. In that case, users must be aware and be more responsible for every action that they take while using social media and not simply blame the social media companies. Other than that, the users' poor behavior is also a reason behind these hate speeches on social media. Some users are taken away by their negative emotions and behavior, which leads them to act in such negative ways in social media. To bring things together, social media companies are not accountable for its users' hate speech, and the users themselves should take the responsibilities for everything that appears on their social media accounts, from their status updates, comments to pictures and videos, and links they share. Both social media companies and its users should work together to bring social media environment to a better place and not hold the social media companies accountable for their users' hate speech. Thank you.
To conclude, hate speech expresses hate or encourages violences towards a person or group based on something such as race, religion, sex, or sexual orientation. Moreover, hate speech is usually taught to include communication of animosity or disparagement of an individual or group on an account of a group characteristic such as race, color, national origin, sex, disability, religion, or sexual orientation. One of the way we can fight hate speech is by speaking up about equality, inclusivity, and diversity. Some refer to this method as counter speech. The more we can undermine hate speech with loving words, logical arguments, and truth telling, the more that hate speech will begin to lose its power. Another method that can combat hate speech is education. When it comes to bullying, cyberbullying, harassment, and hate crimes, the more people are educated on these issues, the more we can prevent them in the future. Last but not least, social media creators can also filter or censor hateful comments to protect their users. Thank you.